Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. I'm Gus, and I'm joined with my co-host Alvaro. Tonight you'll be staying in room 144, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the iconic slasher film by Tobe Hooper. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that Do Not Disturb sign as we try to survive one truly disturbed family with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths. In particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What is going on, all my power tool enthusiasts, and thank you for checking back in to the Grand Cinema Hotel. Tonight, in honor of continuing the Halloween month, we will be discussing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm here with Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
Yeah, sorry about that. I got lost in the sauce right away because I didn't know that this was actually your first time seeing this movie. Do you have any thoughts or opinions that you want to open up the show with?
Yeah, so I never really, no one ever showed me this movie for the longest time. I was holding it off for a special occasion, and finally, since I'm watching a bunch of movies, it seemed like this year was the year. And it just so happened, because you didn't know that, but it just so happened that you picked it for to talk about. So it's really interesting because I know this is an all-time classic, and I've been exposed to so much of the scenes about it, right? And for the most part, I know that it's a short film, and I felt like I had seen it for a long time, but to finally be able to enter this claustrophobic world that this film is, I think, I know it's like a frontier for like independent filmmaking, right? And I think that's why I like it so much. But also in the same way, unfortunately, I feel like it doesn't look very good, even in the upgraded scans that they've done now. There's a Blu-ray out, and I'm pretty sure there's a 4K out for it too. And like, it's just, it doesn't take anything away from it, but I think it's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, I don't know if you know much about Tobe Hooper, but he originally worked in like documentary filmmaking,
right,
and those types of things. So I do think that just kind of adds to the appeal of this. Feels like an original found footage movie. Like it's like something you shouldn't be seeing.
That's true, and I think that's where the appeal does come from. And the more I sit about it and think about it, I do like it more. But I think at first, I'm watching it in 2022, and sometimes it's hard to take off those goggles. And I think obviously someone like the lines or the dialogue, it's a little wonky, but it's like I think that doesn't really matter too much in this movie.
Yeah, did you ever think that this was like a horror comedy somewhat? Because it's very funny.
Yeah, it is funny. And no, I didn't. Those are the parts that I wouldn't have gotten from actually not watching it. It's like I could get all these scenes from it and all these iconic, sequences from it that I've seen repeated in horror. What would you call them? Like when they make a bunch of like a reel with a bunch of videos on it,
Yeah, like a sizzle reel or something.
Yeah, like I've seen scenes from this movie from a long time, but that's the stuff I didn't know about. And I think you describing it as found footage is just like the perfect way to think about it, because this film doesn't really end either. I really feel like, and it kind of you're welcomed into a little spot in hell, and then you leave. You're lucky to be able to leave, and then, but it still exists. It's still there, and I think there has been a sequel to this, right?
A bunch, yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So and obviously there was a pretty new like reimagining of it, right?
Yeah, the influencer version.
Exactly. Yeah,
the gentrification version.
Didn't watch it, but
he was actually a working class hero in that film.
Was he really?
He was the good guy.
That's funny. Yeah. See, that's what I was gonna say. I can easily say that why it's inspired for people to want more from it, because the first film is just like a little taste, and I think that's why it's it is. I could still say it's my favorite slasher though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you made a lot of great points, and I do think it's interesting that I honestly thought we had watched this movie before, like together. I was like, of the many films that you and I have sat together and watched over the years, I just assumed this was one of them because we have watched quite a few horror movies together.
Yeah.
So we obviously have a way different experience with this movie because this is one of the first movies I saw when I was a kid that it made me enjoy horror movies. I finally, like, the mask was taken off, like, no pun intended, and I was like, oh, these are, like, I see why these are good, and, like, they're not just scary because, I was the kind of kid when I would watch horror movies with my parents, I would dread it, and I would sit there with, like, my face just, like, burrowed into my mom's shoulder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would watch the things, I would use the music cues as, like, okay, I think I'm safe, I can watch this now.
Yeah.
And then when the music would get ratcheted up, I would just hide. So this was the first time I really kind of just was able to sit there and, like, see past the facade of the film, and I think that's what really made me enjoy it, just like right from the jump when I was a little kid. And I wrote down some of my thoughts and opinions because I feel like this is a movie that it's scarier when you imagine it than when you actually watch it.
Yeah.
You get what I mean by that?
Exactly.
Like, in your head, it's definitely 10 times scarier.
And I think that might come from again, putting on the 2022 goggles or whenever you watched it, is the terms of the people that are on screen that are being victimized aren't exactly somebody I can see myself in. Those characters aren't relatable.
Yeah, they're pretty empty.
And I mean, they're from an era too that we're way different and removed from. But I think that is an interesting thought because I felt the same. But if I was in this situation, or I think this movie is everybody's inside nightmare. Every single time they're like, everybody's obviously scared of dying in some way or form. And I think it's like this movie really brings out that fear that you have of every little creepy person that you see, or the worst that can happen when you pick up a stranger, right? Yeah. And I think in an era, that's why it's a little unrelatable because you're like, I would never pick up a hitchhiker, right? It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. But then before, it's obviously Southern hospitality. Like, we're just driving. Obviously, that is always the start of a lot of horror films is trying to be nice, being a good person, and it gets you, So I think that's what this film really does well, is that inner nightmare we all have. You could place yourself in that, and it's like, well, this would be one of the most worst, horrible things that could happen.
Yeah. I think another thing that would changes the experience, especially since you saw this now, is that you never had the whole, oh, this was true.
Which was a big thing that I heard growing up. Even myself, like, I'd never seen the movie, but that's something I heard.
I used to believe it was true because that's what people told me. My mom told me that. My dad told me that. Everybody who I watched that with, like, yeah, this really happened. So that definitely affected my take on the movie for many years, And then I remember when I was a teenager, just on the internet looking up shit about movies, realizing that it wasn't actually real. It's not that it took away from it, but then it made me think, like, no wonder people thought this was so scary as well. It's like all that giant fear that you're talking about in Nightmare of, like, if I pick up a hitchhiker, what if he's a cannibal serial killer?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What if he's plotting? And that is something that I had, because I do know that it's based off of, like, I think Eric Gain is one of the... Ed Gein, yeah. But it's loosely related, It's not even him using the chainsaw isn't. But that's why this movie works, though.
Yeah, now that you mentioned the chainsaw, I think one of the reasons this is so iconic is because I think, as far as I can tell from my research, that it was the first film to use, like, a conventional power tool as a weapon.
That's cool.
So then it just, like, opened up a whole new, like, toy box of options for directors. Like, this guy uses a chainsaw. Well, this guy's going to use, I don't know, a garden hoe or something like that. I just thought that was cool because this movie is so damn influential. Like, I can think of 20 movies off the top of my head that, I mean, I'm not going to do it, but I can think of 20 movies off the top of my head that are just like this,
I feel like Rob Zombie's whole shtick is
exactly.
this movie.
Or The Hills Have Eyes and things like that. Honestly, any movie where you go out into a desolate location and you run into some strangers, freaky.
We talked about it before the podcast, but we've talked about two of them this year that are heavily influenced by this, is X and Pearl.
Yes, and I don't know if it's a hot take. I mean, honestly, I think On this podcast, this is a cold take, but I do prefer X, and so do you. Right?
Yeah, this is a cold take at this point, and that's what I mean. I don't see it as a recency bias, but I think X took what's best from this film, and I think he had made a good point that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre works so well though because it, for any person who watches it that influenced it, it's just like the bones of a story. Like you could add so much more to it. Yeah. You know, but you could just add so much more flesh to this story.
Oh,
yeah.
Like, I need you to mute yourself for 30 seconds.
And I think that's what X did. And but this story, I mean, to have done it when this movie came out, for it to come out, I think is just perfect. You were kind of talking about the thinking it's real, and like the narrator's voice in the beginning is very convincing, you know.
But you had a narrator's voice? I don't think my version did, honestly. It had a text like Star Wars, where it went from top to bottom.
And didn't nobody read it?
Oh, maybe I was just watching it on so low because my daughter was sleeping next to me.
Right.
You know, I'm not even gonna lie. The first 20 minutes when I was rewatching this, it was basically on silent. And then my wife pointed out, she's like, "Have we been watching this on mute the entire time?" And I had to go back and start over.
So there's this. I think it's actually somebody who's very well known. I'm not too. I didn't get his name, but
he was a voice actor.
I believe so, but it's like an iconic, you know, it's like a news reporter's voice.
Oh,
and
okay.
it's like the event you're about to see, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So I was doing some research and reading about that, and obviously Tobe Hooper was a young man when he made this.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes it a little more cringe now with hindsight. But so the reason that he wanted to market this movie with the false advertising of it being true is because he had just witnessed, you know, Vietnam and Watergate and things like that. And this is kind of like a FU to the American government, like literally his own words that, oh, well, the U.S. government lies all the time, so I'm going to lie about my movie being
Nice.
real.
That is a young man's take.
Adjust glasses.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
So, I mean, it's cool. It's cringy. It's power to the people, fuck the man, right?
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
I think it only worked so well before, you know. That's the type of stuff that we're talking about because pre-social media, pre-cell phone, pre-internet, you could advertise a movie like that, and who's going to fact check you?
I mean, the Blair Witch did it almost 25, 30 years later, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about as well the inspiration for the character of Leatherface, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so funny that anyone ever thought this was true because Tobe Hooper has stated multiple times that he was like Christmas shopping in like a Sears or something like that, and he passed by the power tools, and the chainsaw caught his eye, and he kind of picked it up, and he thought about how heavy it was, and like how you wielding this thing, and that's where the inspiration came from for like, oh, this would be sick if there was a killer who did something like used this tool, and then the actual Leatherface himself. Who knows how true this is, but in the 50s, he said he had a pediatrician that he went to who said that when he was in medical school that he skinned a cadaver and he wore the face to a Halloween party, and that was the inspiration and the birth of Leatherface right there, was those two things.
That's crazy. I wonder how true that is, though.
It's outlandish, but because it's the 50s, I'm like, yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know, I guess my only questions are how would that work, right? But they're doctors, and I'm not the doctor.
All I can think of is Dwight in the office.
Yeah.
When he cuts the face off the dummy.
Exactly. Like, is that where also I wonder if Silence of the Lambs, the book, had been written yet, you know?
No, and I got to assume Silence of the Lambs is a huge inspiration.
It's the same doctor, huh?
Yeah.
They knew the same doctor.
Yeah. So I think we could talk about the cast and the crew a little bit because I have some interesting stuff that I wanted to discuss. So it's written and directed by Tobe Hooper. He's most known for this and Poltergeist.
Yes.
Which I think Poltergeist is the better movie.
Yeah. More fleshed
Written
out.
by Hooper and Kim Henkel. And, of course, that's a man. I thought it was kind of cool at first. I was like, oh, Kim Henkel. Wow, a woman wrote this movie? No, it's just a guy named Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Yeah. He's mostly known for his work with the TCM. I'm going to shorten it for now and just call it TCM franchise. And he served as a producer on future installments. So I do think that's a nice touch that he has been involved this entire time. What really caught me by surprise, though, was this story about the distributor. So it's produced by a company called Vortex, and it was distributed by a company called Bryanston. And, when I was Wikipediaing this film, I thought, let me click on the Bryanston tab and see if I could find anything interesting. What are the movies they've made? So they were known originally for distributing the pornographic film Deep Throat. Sorry. I don't know why I called it Deep Fake. Other films were John Carpenter's Dark Star, Return of the Dragon, the Kung Fu movie.
Nice.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and a film called The Devil's Reign. And then the company ended up going under due to numerous legal troubles, like 2 years after the release of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, what a coincidence.
So then I was like, okay, let me see what happened here. And in the 70s, the sons of the Colombo crime family, Anthony, Louis, and Joseph Pirano Sr., were the president, vice president, and secretary treasurer of the Bryanston distribution company. And in August of 74, Louis Pirano agreed to distribute the film, right? Production manager Ron Bosman and the Texas Film Commissioner Warren Scarron would receive $225,000 and 35% of the profit. Years later, Bosman was stated as saying, "We made a deal with the devil, and I guess in a way, we got what we deserved."
Yeah.
So this is a mafia distributed film.
Nice.
And I told you before recording, I was like, I have something to tell you that I dug up with this movie. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's ever brought this up. I mean, it's common knowledge on Wikipedia, but I just love this old indie filmmaking story of the mafia distributed this movie and made all the money for it.
Makes me even more think like this really happened,
Powered
right?
the crime family.
Yeah.
Through the power of cinema.
Like who would have known that, the mob was carrying a cinematic.
Yeah, I mean, most of the crew and cast received no money, and after suing Bryanston and winning the court case, obviously, and they were all supposed to get about $500,000, the company declared bankruptcy.
He's like, we don't have any money, by the way.
I thought that was great, but that is just an old time story that if that happens nowadays, they cover that up way better than they used to, I guess.
I mean, it's the fact that they were running it as mob members.
The mafia produced the movie.
I like that. I mean, like, that makes this movie a little better, honestly.
It just adds to the lore, man.
And it makes it more like found footage. It makes you really feel that way.
Yeah, for real. So, we want to talk about the cast a little bit? I mean, I don't have a ton to say about them because they sure do go quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think don't want to really get a lot of time with this Sally. And like you said, she's the scream queen.
Yeah, I mean,
over
she's
anybody.
One of the original Final Girls and an OG Scream Queen. And I know you did have a problem with how her character was written to basically just scream for the final 25, 35 minutes of the film.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes it becomes like one of those like white noises. After she's screaming so much, you look past it. So I think it's just a little too much.
It's what I hate about Temple of Doom,
Yeah.
I don't prefer it. But in a movie like this, to me, it makes sense. I'm more lenient.
That's why I'm saying it doesn't like take it away from me. But I did feel like for the last part, there's no. I mean, she says sorry or no, not sorry, please a couple times, right? But it's almost audibly not a break, and I think it starts to become white noise. But in the same instance, if I was in that position, I probably would scream just
like
as
that.
much.
It wouldn't be like killing of a sacred deer. It'd be like, my dad loves spaghetti.
Yeah. So I do think it's. I didn't think how long it was. I didn't agree with that, but I do understand.
Yeah, and I mean that's a fair take. I don't think that you're being harsh or anything like that to the movie. I mean, yeah, I mean that is just it's an opinion. I thought of Blowout quite a bit when watching this. I thought about how much voiceover work could have been done on this, and maybe one of the reasons it's so grating and annoying to you is because the production itself is not really
that's my
high quality.
Yeah,
so it's like you're watching low budget filmmaking, and it's. I don't want to say it's amateur because I do think they've really made some iconic movie making moments in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
You can definitely. I think when you say it might age poorly, do you mean like the ideas or just the production value?
No, the production value. Yeah, not that this movie is gonna be timeless. I think, but I don't know how well they're gonna be able to keep restoring it. Just the fact of how it was shot, and you can't do anything about that. But
I'm guessing there's not a 4K. I know you said that, but. How could they, right? If it looks this bad?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you mind looking it up?
Yeah, I think because I had looked into it before, and I believe there was one, but
the physical media CD Cenobite from Hellraiser.
Yeah, that's me.
So I did want to talk about the cast a little more because I think the other person, at least, who needs to be brought up from the group of co-eds would be Terry McMinn as Pam.
Yeah, there's a 4K cut of it. Sorry.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's at least good to know.
I mean, I'd be interested in seeing that. Maybe that would make it a little better for me, you know. And then I really don't mean that in a bad way, because that should have never really take away from the story or the influence of the story or how it impacted when it came out. But I'm just putting on the 2022 goggles, and I'm like,
have you ever watched any of David Lynch's films that were shot on like HD cameras from back in the day?
yeah, like Inland Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, like exactly. It'd be like,
Or
okay.
Michael Mann's Miami Vice.
It's like, yeah, okay, I get it, but it does look bad. So, like, I mean, you said that with like Nosferatu, you know? It's like, what are you supposed to do when that's even an older film?
Yeah.
So it's like,
I'm anti-Nosferatu, pro Texas Chainsaw.
just because it looks
so,
like that.
I wanted to get back to Pam really quick because I thought of her, and I don't want to keep harping on X too much, but kind of like that Brittany Snow role in X, you know, where she has some moments, but I did feel like she was used mostly for sex appeal. Like, she was shot in a way that Michael Bay shot Megan Fox in Transformers. You know what I mean? And I do think that her and Sally, they're the scream queens, you know, I guess, of the film. But honestly, the film is like extremely violent against them. And for the men, like, did you notice how quickly the men died?
Yeah, they just took them out.
Most of them, it was like, it wasn't even, half the time they didn't even know what was happening to them. It just bonk on the head, like real Looney Tunes type stuff, you know?
I did notice that. It's a lot of the hammer hits, very Looney Tunes type of hits.
Yeah, that's what I mean about it being a comedy. But I did think that Terry McMinn was kind of the one to be like the slaughtered lamb. I know we talked about American Werewolf recently, but you know, she gets the meat hook. She gets she's actually aware of what is happening to her. We get the freezer shot of her where it appears, I can't tell if she's dead and just like has a zombie pop out moment, or if she is still alive. But
yeah, exactly.
After that, she's never even brought up again. You know, she really was just there to be meat.
We wanted to use the meat hook. But I mean, it works. I wouldn't take that scene out, but I agree with you.
Other than that, I mean, I don't really feel like any of the men of the group were worthy of really talking about. I do think that the cast, its bright spots are obviously Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface, and then I think Edwin Neal was the name of the Hitchhiker brother. I feel like they carry this film.
I do like also, what is I think it's Franklin. Is that his name? The other guy that's sitting at them with the table? The older guy who's the quote-unquote chef?
Franklin is the brother.
Oh, yeah. So his name... Oh, yeah. It's the
Sally's
cook.
brother.
The cook is his name, right?
He's Leatherface's dad, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the grandpa, too. The old grandpa, which is... that was weird.
I definitely took some notes on them, right? So I think it's another reason that the film is so iconic is because Leatherface really is the template for the modern silent killer of everything going after. John Carpenter, you have some splaining to do.
Yeah.
You know, he's a hulking mute man for the most part, or he can't talk, at least. I wouldn't say that he's mute, but he can audibly make disturbing noises with his mouth.
Like there's like this I guess it's because Tobe Hooper, we said, kind of inspired him from holding the chainsaw. What kind of person would use this as a weapon, and what kind of person would be able to wield this kind of weapon? And it seems somebody like Leatherface, somebody you're like, could he be an incest type of like
almost likely,
right?
Yeah,
that's what it comes out. And like, I think it's like that brute strength that we associate with things that are not natural.
I think the 2003 one addresses that. One of them shows him as a baby. It's
and
like the origin story of the family.
Yeah, of Leatherface. He has a cute little Leatherface, right? No,
that's hilarious.
No, but that's why it's like it comes off, and none of that is explained. But it's such well, I don't know. Maybe it's me putting on again, knowing how much comes into this film after. But he just comes off as somebody like, this is a disturbing person who's not close to being. Is very far away from being normal.
He's detached from society.
Exactly.
For sure. He does not live in a society.
Or he's growing up with his dad and his grandpa and his brother like eating meat and stuff like that. So
yeah. So he's like the family's muscle and the butcher.
Yeah.
So he's the killer in the family.
Exactly.
I did think it was interesting, like you mentioned, the cook, who's their father. The family dynamic between them is like the brother is like the rebellious teenager. Leatherface is like the housewife. You know what I mean? Like
he even
wears,
dresses like it too.
Yeah, he wears like a mask with makeup on it.
I like that.
Blonde hair, and he wears aprons, and like he never wears like a dress or anything like that. But I saw him described once as a bourgeois housewife.
Yeah, I like
of
no
a southern gothic home.
and I like that. That's
You know, when I think of the dinner scene, I think of like the most disturbed, disgusting, like Norman Rockwell painting. You know that painting of the family at Thanksgiving, the turkey over the table.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
The
what I
disturbed.
think. Yeah, I'm like, this is the anti-version of that.
I think
bro.
I think my parents had never seen this movie, but this is the reason they never let me go over to people's houses. I think this is what they
They might eat
imagined.
you.
Yeah, this is what they imagined other people's families might be like. But I think that's where a lot of this film, kind of why it's my favorite slasher, and why it is iconic is I think a lot of the setting is just uncomfortable.
I wanted to bring this up earlier before the pod. We were kind of talking, and I was like, wait, let's just save it.
Right.
I think another thing that makes this movie so special is the atmosphere.
Exactly.
Where it lacks in story or script or dialogue or anything like that, I think the atmosphere definitely carries the film. And while it might not be shot beautifully, its editing by her name was Sally. Well, I don't even know if she was a woman, but Sally Richardson.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually find anything on her. Most of the people involved with this were kind of just, this was it for them,
Because
really.
they didn't get paid, so
But I think the atmosphere and Sally Richardson's editing and pacing of the movie is what makes it so good.
yeah, because there's like all these things. I do think the cinematography is really good. You know,
Yeah,
even
there's
though
some really crazy shots in this.
like the framing is insane, and I think partly to kind of bring that back to the point that we were talking about is in the moments where I don't know, she is screaming for all these 13, like I don't know how long it actually is, but it feels like 30 minutes or the last 20 minutes, but in the background you see all these other bones and faces and things, and there's so many stories there.
He's
Like
a
how long
craftsman.
have they been doing this, or how long before Leatherface, how did they do this, how did this start? And I think there's all these, like you see like some of the candle holders are bones, or some of the lights
the
are
chairs.
yeah, and all of those things are so you wouldn't believe you'd get this much of a world in an independent film at this time.
No, you're definitely right about that. Like, it's a perfect haunted house. Skeletons everywhere, chairs made of human bodies and flesh. The light fixtures being, instead of just like some kind of fabric wrap, it's
Like skin, right?
skin with a human face on it.
Yeah.
Like, and I do think that while the screaming is kind of a cheap way out for the dialogue, everything she's looking at is like, dude, you would scream
Yeah.
too if you walked into a room of feathers and a chicken in a cage and a chaise lounge with the skeleton head on top. You
It's
know
like
what I mean?
anybody who's came in this room has never came out alive. Anybody
Yeah,
who
no.
came in this house has died anywhere in this house.
Yeah. And you have to assume that a lot, like you said, how long has this been happening for and how many people? One of the things X actually ripped off was when you see how many cars are on the property, right? So when one of the first of the group of guys goes into the house when he's looking for gas, he comes across like 5-10 cars, and he's kind of like, what the hell? Like, they're all old and they're abandoned. Like, they look like they're from the 50s and things like that.
Yeah.
So it does imply that this has been going on
For a while.
very long time. And I know they have budget restraints, and also that Toby Hooper was very cognizant of the fact that he was trying to get this to be widely distributed, so he couldn't do as much as he wanted.
Crazy.
So a lot is left to the imagination. And we're pretty veteran horror fans. So for us, yes, we want to see the gore, we want to see the disgusting, but this movie just leaves it to your imagination for the most part. Like, I don't even know if Leatherface's chainsaw ever even has blood on it.
No.
Like, there's the scene where Kim is hanging from the meat hook watching her boyfriend get butchered, and
There's only blood from the past things.
yeah, and like that feels so cheap, but it also does imply that it's like this is regular for them. This is like, look, the wall's just covered in blood. This has happened a million times.
Which is creative ways to not have to try to get that rating, right? It's like, I'm not going to put any blood on them, but you could imagine that if they hooked her, she's obviously bleeding. but it doesn't have to be like this big spurt of blood coming out. And I think it's really interesting that this film worked as well without having to use so much blood.
Yeah, I mean, another really famous independent film that used this tactic is Reservoir Dogs. The ear cutting scene, you never actually see it, but everyone swears that they saw it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's so nasty when he cut his ear off. But the movie cuts away and you never see it happen.
You know what? I couldn't help but compare in my head these two movies. I don't know really why. I guess I just wanted to see if you had, if in your head these two kind of lived the same as like Evil Dead and this movie.
Oh, yeah. And I do think it's that Looney Tunes horror comedy mixture that you can't help but feel that these movies are all kind of related in some way.
Obviously,
and I know that the Evil Dead came after, so...
Because I know Evil Dead is more intentionally funny, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
this one
It's
just
written in a funny
like the
way.
dad has funny lines, and their relationship in that weird wonky family is funny,
It's
and then
hilarious.
how the group of friends talk to each other, and in between when everything is normal, how they react is some of the funny parts in this movie. But in Evil Dead, it is more meant to be funny. But they live in the same place to me because it's like these are what you would make as a young filmmaker, independent filmmaker in the eras that
I'm
they
gonna make
came
the
out.
wildest movie I can.
Yeah, and I think even had we been granted, that access to things, like if we were them now, I don't think we would make necessarily horror movies like that anymore. So I think I appreciate that that's where the mindset was at that time, and you can't really compare it to any other time.
Yeah, for sure, dude. The movie really is incomparable. Like, I can think of other things that are like it, but it really stands on its own and above so many others. I think, now that you brought up Evil Dead, it made me think of one of the opening shots of the film. It's a really nasty sequence. Like, this is a yucky movie.
Yeah.
I thought
seriously.
that when I watched
Yeah.
it yesterday. I was like, I've seen this a million times, or not a million times, honestly. I've probably seen it at least 5 to 7, but every time it hits me, I'm like, this is just gross. Like,
Everything.
it's pitch black, and you have these photography flashes, and you're seeing like old, like decrepit zombie bodies. And
Yeah.
just like when we talked about American Werewolf, like they look like the zombie from American Werewolf, like green and like holes in their skin and like the front of an Iron Maiden cover. You know what I mean? Like this is where the iconic imagery comes from. And then you have like something that would be something you would only see at like Not Scary Farm or something. You get this wide angle shot it actually starts very tight and then it pulls all the way out. And it's this like art piece. I don't even know what to call it. It's a headstone with a man's like burnt zombie body. And then like he's holding a woman, like it's like it looks like a meat sculpture, honestly. That's the only way I could describe it.
And it kind of setting the tone really well for the movie, I think, is that something I really noticed was the radio. If you listen to the radio a lot, they're kind of talking about how there's these grave robbers.
These are the things I missed because I was watching it on silent.
So there's like the radio keeps talking about these grave robbers that have been around stealing, and that's a concern. And I think that's a really good angle because you brought up the Vietnam thing, is that the news is lying. They're not letting the people know that it's actually, but you get the guy at the gas station, the old guy who's drunk, rolling around on the floor, talking about you wouldn't believe, like kind of the things I've seen, or he's kind of going on another speech about that. And I think those are the things, the undertones of this movie that kind of really transcend its independentness. And you would see in other movies that are quote unquote deeper, more artistic or whatever, or more thought out. And I think that's where Tobe Hooper really proved that it didn't matter what budget he had. His storytelling and his story making and his story crafting was there. And I think this movie, those little things are stuff that I had to really think about after when I sat there in terms of what are the bigger themes that this movie kind of presents. And the fact that you brought up the Vietnam thing, I didn't know that. And I think that a lot of this movie is just kind of talking about like they lie to us. There's all this stuff going on, and you get put in the shits and you just got to deal with it.
Yeah, this movie really has inspired a lot of this is funny, a lot of thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a movie that has been discussed and dissected, not to use more puns, since it's come out. Like there's been psychological studies on this movie on how well, I guess it has to be this way, but how men view violence on women.
Yeah.
And just they've done studies where like they would show a guy like 30 horror films, right? And then they would show him something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and like something like that where he enjoyed that more. And then they see that this is kind of becoming a pattern of like, why is this just something that is like in the bones of horror filmmaking, of women being the centerpiece of danger? You know what I mean? I just, I mean, that's something way too deep for us, honestly. But I did think that was very interesting.
Yeah, I do think it probably comes from. I know you probably feel this way too, like because you have a wife, but it comes from gentleness of women, right? And like to see something so gentle be completely taken advantage. Yeah, I think that's what as a man we don't see ourselves as that, and then when we see something like that, it's just like that's the worst thing that could happen. Like you would take advantage of something that could obviously like what was Sally gonna do against Leatherface? That's
Nothing.
why
she took the smartest option. She bust out of there.
she crashes through the window.
Not once, twice.
I like that. Because that's the realistic part of it. Like that's what I would fucking do.
That's what Toby Hooper said. He was like, the reason I wanted her to bust out of there twice is because the movie rule was that you never try to escape the same way twice. But in this case, I wanted to. This movie's all about breaking the rules, man. It's a protest movie,
exactly.
dog. So he wanted to fucking have her bust out twice because yes, you will do anything it takes to survive. Even try the same thing twice.
How many times in a movie have they tried something and they were so close and you were like, they just never tried it again? Just because they just were like that didn't work. Like,
well, like if you're busting down a door, right? Maybe you can't do it in one try, but if you take breaks and keep busting it down, like you're eventually breaking away at the hinges. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Nope. It's the meme of the fat old dude mining his way towards the diamond
and just stopping right before. Yeah. That's exactly what it is, and I think that's why I like this. To the fact that like I would, okay, if they left the door open, they're distracted, and I ran out and they still caught me, okay. But the second that they're distracted again, I'm gonna try it again because I'm trying to escape. I'm trying to get the fuck out of here. Like it doesn't matter if I have to retry. It doesn't matter if I have to break things. Like, and I thought that Sally does really. That's why I was like, besides the overall how long the screaming is, I do think she brings out that fear that we all would have, a realistic.
It becomes primal. Like
yeah,
just
it becomes primal.
Sense.
That's exactly.
And we're kind of jumping around here, but I think we've had a good flow to the episode by jumping around. So I did want to mention the final shot of her escaping,
right?
And just the
iconic
look of terror on her face. She's laughing.
That laughing.
You know what I mean? Like she's been Joker brained at this point. You know what I mean? Like this broke her.
She's like, you wouldn't believe the things I've seen, huh?
She is now going to be the old drunk guy rolling around on the floor talking about what happened. But I mean, spoiler for the new one if you haven't seen it, she comes back and she gets murked instantly, so she learned nothing.
L plus you learn nothing. plus yeah, plus I still Leatherface, haven't aged at all.
It's like when the new Halloween trailer that comes out and it's got Laurie Strode holding the fucking gun right to Michael Myers' face, and I looked at you and I was like, no shot she even pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
that's actually what happens to Sally in the new one.
And in terms of just kind of bringing it back to that is like we saw Michael Myers get it. They beat him up, dude. They were stabbing him. They were hitting him did nothing. And she's gonna shoot him straight in the face. Even if she does, what is that gonna do at this point?
He has plot armor.
And I mean, none of these kids had a gun.
No.
So you know what? I just think it's sometimes like you got to remove the fact that they wouldn't even have a gun, or they're in a situation where, because the fact that if they would have shot Leatherface, he probably would have died, right? He's not unstoppable. It's just the fact that he's a freak.
Well, all it took was one chainsaw cut on his leg for him to just...
Yeah, like he's a person. Yeah. I mean, he kind of still ran like nothing.
He had a Tom and Jerry scream.
Yeah. And that's why I do think he's an incest type of character. Be like the way when he does talk or how he audibly voices himself, you're like, come on.
Yeah, no. Disgusting family, dude.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I ended up saying it earlier, but I wanted to, was the family dynamic of they're actually called the Sawyers. I don't know if you know that. But the father, he's like, why can't we just do this fast? Like, I'm not into killing folk.
Yeah.
I just want to cook them. You know what I mean?
Exactly. He's like, I just want to eat them.
Yeah. Something that, I've always wanted to talk about on the pod, and we've mentioned it here and there, is when we went to our iconic and classic adventure.
Yes.
When we went to Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights.
Too.
We went on this maze. Very fun.
This is one of my favorite ones.
It wasn't like... Well, I didn't think it was one of the best because I thought it was just like the Halloween one or the other one where it's like there's just 15 leather faces.
That is the issue with that. Yeah.
It wasn't as good as something like the Exorcist one. Like I thought.
That was the best one.
But I wanted to talk about. I'm tying it in by bringing up the effect that this movie has on people when they watch it. Right. So they had the I don't know if you remember on the lower lot they had the barbecue stand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you think of like theme park food, it's not the best quality, right? So you're already kind of thinking like, I would never eat like prime rib or tri-tip from Universal Studios because it's just like microwave food, right? But when you put the aesthetic and the facade over it, that it's cannibal, like it's human flesh, like it made it so much worse in my head that I would feel like sick every time I looked at the barbecue stand.
Yeah, you're like
I imagine that human flesh would taste like Universal Studios tri-tip.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's so funny.
And I was like, oh man, just wanted to like, it made me want to puke every time I looked
It's
at
like,
it.
every time we went into that maze, it was just the meat they had in the freezer, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this smells like what human. Yeah, that's so funny.
Like, this is just the chicken we actually serve you at the Jurassic Cafe.
See, but I do think it's because the Texas Chainsaw, the remake came out this year, right?
No, it was last year, and I mean, there's one every couple of years, I would say.
Because I was gonna say is the maze for still have so much connection to the original in terms of they're not making them off of the other ones, you know?
Matters.
And like people still wanting to go into the maze, like that's one of the popular mazes there. You know,
I think the fourth Halloween or the Halloween maze was based off the fourth movie.
I did,
think
yeah.
It's based off the first one.
I did, yeah, it was.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the other thing I wanted to bring up about it? That it is the only one that's really like known for anything. I know this. I think the second one has Dennis Hopper in it, and was kind of like the appeal for that one.
Nice.
Is that he plays like a sheriff, and I think, I actually haven't seen it, but if I had to guess, the way the movie ends so abruptly and it just cuts to black, that you could pick up the sequel of like Sally going back to town and be like, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And then them, like the cops, the police, everybody getting involved in it, becoming like more of a manhunt or something like that.
And then Leatherface just killing all the cops.
Yeah.
That'd be tight.
Hey, Cab.
Yeah, hey, Cav. Because he's a working man in the new one.
He's a working class hero.
Exactly.
That was one. I'm kind of winding down. I don't really have too much more to say, but another interesting look at this movie is that it's a criticism of industrial capitalism.
Nice.
That this family was displaced from their life and their career because they were in the slaughter industry and they've been replaced by the machine, the air gun that kills the cattle.
Because that's a point in the...
It is a point of pride in their family that the grandpa could kill 60 cows in 5 minutes, and the only reason he couldn't do more is because they couldn't get the bodies out of the way fast enough. And then it ties in more of that Looney Tunes humor where he keeps picking up and dropping the hammer.
Yeah.
It's like the worst kill you've ever seen.
He's like, you do it, Grandpa. He's like, he's a legend. He's been the best. He can't even pick up the hammer.
My wife, I mean, she had seen this movie before too, but the funniest thing she had mentioned to me, she was like, why does the grandpa look like one of the vampires from What We Do in the Shadows?
Yeah.
Like that's something they keep in the basement and is 1,000 years old.
And that was something, see, that I didn't, since I hadn't ever really seen it, I didn't know that he was going to be alive.
No,
up until they put their finger, and you're like, oh, what? He's moving?
He's just a corpse. It's like, blah, 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 blah.
And you're like, I don't think the blood is working. I don't think you're getting any younger.
And like, was he a vampire? Were they trying to
make
him more young or something?
I do think, like you were kind of talking about the psychological studies that have been made on this movie. I think Leatherface as a character is very interesting. I've been watching a lot of horror movies, obviously, for the month, and a lot of the older monster movies, there was always this plot device that the monster is very human, right, and has emotions, and they fall in love or whatever. And I think
King Kong falls in love with the lady.
Yeah, because it's vulnerable, right? But I did think Leatherface has some of that, and it's not that it really presents it in any way. But the fact that we see him kind of in makeup, and the fact that he is a family man, you know what I mean? And I think those are the parts where it's always really interesting to see like that presented in films with serial killers, because in real life, some of the stuff that we watch, like some serial killers are really nice, obviously, to their kids or whatever it may be, but then they're really horrible to other people. And
I think a good character who is the opposite would be Buffalo Bill. And since you had brought up Silence of the Lambs, he's completely by himself in the same kind of atmosphere, like that disgusting flesh dungeon.
Yeah, that's
but he's
comparison.
completely alone. You know what I mean? And Leatherface has this crazy dysfunctional family dynamic, and I think it really makes the film a lot better. I think it builds to his character dynamic, because even though he doesn't say anything, you see that he's also like an abused child. Like the father,
exactly.
Like, you fucked up the door. You know what I mean?
They're
like,
abused, both of them. Yeah.
They're murdering a group of kids, and the dad is upset that the door got messed up. You know what I mean? So you see how I'm obviously not trying to make any excuses for the actions of this fictional
But
character.
I think it comments on that.
Yeah, it builds to who he is,
Kind of like you were talking about a displacement of this family would cause frustration to the dad. Start beating on these kids. The kid is an incest, and you're hitting his head. Like, what kind of evil are you, making there? And then family always just adds that dynamic. It's like, well, my dad is this way, my brother's this way, so it's okay to be this way.
My grandpa's a vampire.
Yeah, I have no mother around for. So I think that's what this film does really well, and none of that is talked about. It's not mentioned. You just kind of get those moments, like you said, like where he talks about the gun in the beginning being better, and I think just those simple lines gives your mind so much to like, wait, yeah, I could put myself in that situation.
Yeah, you know what? The Hitchhiker, I wanted to bring this up, is one of my favorite memories from this movie from when I was very little is that I would impersonate the Hitchhiker to my mom. And I always used to be like, "You like head cheese?" She'd get really fucking mad. She'd be like, "Stop, that's disgusting." Like
My brothers are real good.
I was banned from saying head cheese in our house. Yeah, because my mom just did not like the visual image of her 7-year-old son saying that to her. "You like head cheese?"
My brother cooks it real good.
So, I mean, kind of a short episode, but I do think that we packed a lot into this 45 minutes.
The movie is short. It's one of those iconic short horror films. And I guess one of the closing thoughts that I would say is the fact that this movie, all gas, no brakes from the beginning. Yeah. I feel like in the beginning, it's kind of that's the only part that kind of feels like where it's setting up, but it takes its time really well. Like not a minute spared. Like that's the time that they use to develop the characters is just enough. You don't need to know much more or much less. It doesn't matter.
Like stopping at the gas station and having the conversation with the revealed father later, it builds that mistrust of like, he was like, "No, don't go, stay here. Like the gas will come. Like, trust me, you don't want to be going around on people's land." And then just for that big reveal later on for, when Sally does escape to just get taken back to the house by the gas station clerk, the cook. Yeah, it's just, like you said, no time is wasted. You realize later on that, oh, that was important that they stopped there and things like that.
And there's just so many iconic scenes in this, but the ending, which I've seen a lot, it just starts with Sally laughing a lot, but then Leatherface kind of dancing with the chainsaw.
It's the original Joker dance.
Yeah, it's super iconic. We kind of talked about it in Pearl, where she's kind of doing it. In X, when she's old and she kind of gets her first kill in the movie, she kind of does her little dance, and that's how Texas Chainsaw Massacre has really inspired a lot of people. And I think it has that connection. I'm saying where your monster has feelings, they're still humanized in a way, and those moments do that. And you kind of get Leatherface kind of like, you got away, but this doesn't end. This is like, because I did think the comedy part of this and this ending sequence is when the trucker helps her and he like grabs the wrench and throws it at his head. Yeah. And boing, and then he just and then the chainsaw, that whole, and then they're just kind of the way that he's chasing them. It seems like it would be in a cartoon. They're just kind of just waiting for him and he's right behind and they both start running and they're just running in circles.
Did you notice that the truck had a name like as if it was a boat or something like that? It said Black Maria on the side.
Oh no.
I really liked that. The small character touch of like, let's name the truck.
And then I also like when the other truck driver comes up, the one that she ends up leaving on. It's like, what are you waiting for? Like, right? Like she's trying to get on, but he's trying to like, in the beginning, he's like, what's going on? What's going on? Like, oh. And then, so I really enjoyed the ending of this film. I thought even when he's trying to put his the chainsaw through the metal door and it just not going through. Yeah. I enjoyed that too. It's like he wouldn't know. He just doesn't know that what's a car, right? What is this type of... And this film just...
There's a giant motorcycle with the little house in the middle.
Yeah. It's like, what? I've never seen one of these before. So all those things are why I really enjoy this film. And I think I'll continue to watch it throughout the years. And it's like a perfect slasher. You throw this on and you're very uncomfortable from the get-go. There's something eerie going on. And it's in Texas too, right?
Yeah, they did shoot on location, 110-degree days. Lots of people were injured making this movie. So I know Tobe Hooper, classic moment. He made a movie and then everybody hated him after because it was like the worst experience of their lives.
Yeah.
I know he said it took them many years to cool down and kind of forgive him.
Say the movie's tight though, right?
Yeah. Hey, and you made no money.
Yeah.
The mafia took it all.
Sorry about it. what was I gonna say? Oh, another scene that I wanted to bring up actually before is the eye sequences when it's just a shot of her eye, kind of like I thought that was like really really good because it's like how is it just a shot of her eye, and I could really feel like the way she's moving it in terms of like what you were talking about. She's looking at everything in the room and it's such panic, and this is the worst thing that could have happened to me. All my friends are dead.
Some of the best eye acting I've ever seen.
Yeah, and like it's ridiculous to call it that, but it's like there's so much terror shown, and then it's just an eye moving and so rapidly, and I think those are just like you have to give it to the actress Sally, right, and
Marilyn
the director
Byrne.
and the director,
Yeah.
and like I just think knowing what you would want as the viewer, what's gonna make you uncomfortable, and there's nothing. She's not bleeding from the eye or anything, but there's so much that's being said in that scene.
It's really lightning in a bottle, honestly. Like it's they captured a special piece of movie magic, honestly.
Yeah.
And while I don't think that this is one of the best movies of all time, I don't think you can even put it in contention of like this is one of the best horror movies of all time. I just think it's so iconic, and it's like a textbook for like how do you make a great horror movie, And I think of it like that. So it's like honor and respect, peace and love to the movie. It's not really like, oh, this is the best one. I don't think it is, but I just think that it's so easy and fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's the best slasher, right? And I think that's what it does best.
Yeah.
The goal is to get these crazy kills, and it does that very well.
So if you haven't seen this, I mean, what are you doing, man? It's Halloween time. Go watch this movie.
Yep.
It's really short. It won't take up too much of your time. I mean, I'm not trying to use that as a selling point, but it's a lightning in a bottle, quick experience, like a flash in the pan. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So I definitely think if you haven't seen this, I couldn't recommend it more. And if you have seen it and you've listened to this, tell us what you think, man. I want to hear how you rate it or think about it in comparison to every other horror movie that you've seen, honestly. Like, where does it rank for you? And, yeah, man, I mean, I don't really have too much more to say.
No, me neither. I mean, I'm glad that I saw it for the first time. I do think this is going to be a film that I'm going to keep putting on, like I said. And I think I might end up loving it more. For me, it might grow, because it is somewhat new to me. I do think that this is a film that whoever I meet in the future, whatever, maybe if they've never seen it, I want to show that to them, just to like, if you're a horror fan, I do think this has everything that you would want in a certain type of like horror. Like if Halloween is your type of stuff, Freddy Krueger and all this stuff, this fits in perfectly. And I think it's so far my favorite of it.
I last thing I'll say is I'm going to harp on it one more time, that not knowing that you hadn't seen this, and since I've known you for so long, it feels like a layer was revealed today. It's like I discovered that you smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what the hell? I didn't know that.
I thought I knew this guy.
Everything there was to know about Alvaro. He hasn't even seen one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. So, because I think we talked about that in one of the episodes before, where you said you kind of grew up as a Texas Chainsaw as opposed to Silence of the Lambs. I think it's for that episode.
No, I probably said as opposed to Halloween.
That's what it was. That's what it was. And that's what was interesting to me, because I guess I was on the other side. My mom, she doesn't really watch too many horror movies, but for some reason she was really into Halloween. So but if I had to, even now comparing the two, I would have much rather have grown up on Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So with that shot being thrown, thank you for checking back into the Grand Cinema Hotel. Like and subscribe. You know the deal with all the buttons. Just press them, send us some love, and happy Halloween. Keep watching scary movies.
Thank you for listening. Bye.